Let's turn our attention to a developing story right now and an interesting development that's happened in the alleged Toolkit probe. And that's the fact that the Delhi police team of Delhi police personnel landed up at the offices of Twitter India in the national capital. And this is in reference to a preliminary inquiry that the Delhi police is carrying out in the alleged Congress toolkit and the manipulated media tag that was put against the tweets of certain BJP leaders. Now, if you've not been tracking this story, let me just quickly tell you what's happened so far. To begin with, an alleged Congress toolkit emerged on social media, shared widely by BJP leaders who claim that this was a toolkit created by the Congress party to corner the government, to question the government and criticize its COVID policies, to raise and amplify the surround sound on all COVID related policies and really counter the central government. That became a big controversy on social media. Soon after, there were a few fact checkers who looked into these pages of the alleged Congress toolkit and raised questions on its authenticity to say whether or not it was really put out by the Congress party or who were the original designers of this toolkit. Soon after that, Twitter decided to label these tweets put out by BJP leaders, calling them manipulated media. Effectively, manipulated media is a label that's used by the social media platform for tweets where they believe there is content that is manipulated, photoshopped, in some ways altered to mislead you. And so they put that tag so that when you read this tweet, you are also aware of what Twitter's warning is. Subsequently, the government, we were told, basis government sources, was not very happy with this move, took it up with Twitter and asked the Twitter the reason for this manipulated media tag, asking Twitter to remove these tags from the tweets of BJP leaders. Meanwhile, the Congress party, encouraged by these posts put up by the fact checkers, went and filed a complaint alleging that this was not a Congress toolkit and people were lying about it. Now, when Delhi police began its prelim inquiry, they sought a response from the Twitter India MD. We are given to understand that the Twitter India MD responded saying this is not something that he directly looks at or it goes via him. Now that's for somebody to explain to us what the Twitter process is, but one can imagine that the MD doesn't really sit and sign off on each fact checking that is done or labeling that is done. And so we understand the Delhi police team landed at Twitter's office. Alok is joining me for the latest on that before we go across to our panelists. Alok, maybe the Delhi police forgot that it was work from home era, but what were they hoping to find at the Twitter office in Delhi and Gurgaon?
Well, let me tell you, Tanvi, that Delhi police had got a complaint from the Congress and this complaint was filed at Parliament Street Police Station last week. This was related to the toolkit and that was allegedly shared by the Congress leader, that was said by the BJP. And then later after that, Twitter had gave the reply and had said that manipulated media. That was the Twitter has given its reply. So this is the main bone of contention that Delhi police wanted to know from the Twitter why they use this word, manipulated media. So that is why they had served the notice to the Twitter and in fact they have asked the Twitter to give them the reply on 22nd of May. But the MD to whom this notice was served, the MD had not given proper reply and he had said that he is not the main authority to give you the reply on this. So that is why today Delhi Police Special Cell teams went to two main offices of the Twitter India. One is in Gurugram and another is in South Delhi's Ladosarai area. Team went there and remained there for 15 to 20 minutes, in fact half an hour around, and when they did not get any proper reply, they served the notice in person, but they came back. They still hope that Twitter India, somebody from the Twitter India will give them the reply, but they are also, on the other hand, they are also mulling if they do not get the reply, then they will go for further legal action into this case. Back to you.
All right. Thanks so much for joining us and bringing us those updates. Alok, of course, we will keep coming back to you. So the Delhi police, they're saying that they needed to know who to speak to and who to get the information from because the MD's response wasn't satisfactory. And so they went to the Twitter India office to give a reminder. But let's talk about this larger story. Anshul Avajit, national spokesperson for the Congress, joins us this evening. Tuhin Sinha, spokesperson for the BJP, and Dr. Pawan Duggal, cyber law expert, also joining us this evening. Dr. Duggal, in fact, I want to start off with you because, of course, right now it's a prelim inquiry. We don't really know what it is that the police is looking at and how will they go about it, legally speaking. But for our viewers to understand, what are the rules and regulations when a social media platform decides to tag something as manipulated media? Can the government of the country really take it up with the social media platform?
Tanvi, the legal position has completely changed in the country with effect from 25th of February 2021, when the government has notified and implemented the Information Technology Intermediary Guidelines and Digital Media Ethics Code Rules 2021. Now that have changed the landscape, primarily because earlier there were due diligence requirements from service providers, from social media companies, but there were no adequate legal consequences for non-supply of information. It was expected that they will cooperate with the law enforcement agencies. But effective 25th of February 2021, now the law is completely changed. Now the law says if the law enforcement agencies ask any information from the social media intermediary or a normal intermediary, they are duty bound to give the same to the police or the law enforcement agencies. They don't do so, that will be tantamounting to violating the IT rules 2021. And in that case, the criminal liability will get triggered in for the company and its top management as to why they should not be punished for offences under the Information Technology Act 2000 and under the Indian Penal Code. So clearly now, with these new changed set of circumstances, it was not in the mouth of any MD of any company to say, look, I'm not the authorized person. Rather than saying that, it would have been much better if the requisite information would have been shared with the government or the law enforcement agencies. Now, having said that, the law enforcement agencies are pretty much free to lodge criminal complaint and also to lodge criminal cases against the service provider and its top management. But more significantly, it's a message that's coming loud and clear that, look, now, whenever any law enforcement agency is asking any information from any service provider, they will have no choice but to comply with the same till such time they go ahead and assail or challenge that particular action in a court of law. So having said that, I still believe that these are very early days as far as this matter is concerned. And we'll have to wait and watch what exactly gets collected by the law enforcement agencies as we go forward.
Yeah, fair enough there. And of course, law enforcement agencies can look at this, and if they're not satisfied with the response by the MD, they can go to the office and find out who can respond to it. Clearly, the visit to the Twitter offices was more of a signal that this is how serious we are, you better get serious about it, and we're not going to take these nonsense replies of, I am not the right person to give you this information. But that being said, Mr. Duggal, when the new norms came out and the new social media policy came out, there was a system put in place about filing a complaint, a redressal grievance committee, and multiple layers before it actually gets escalated to the central ministry. Are those changes already implemented, or will they kick in later and we're looking at a different setup right now?
No, they already have kicked in. The law has been effective from 25th of February 2021. It applies to all major companies, including Twitter, who's a significant social media intermediary. They are mandated to comply with the provisions. Yes, they're supposed to have amended privacy policy, amended terms and conditions as per the latest mandate. They're supposed to have a grievance officer. The grievance officer has to address the grievance within 15 days. Acknowledgement has to be given within 24 hours. But while different companies are still in the process of an interregnum, they're still taking their own sweet time to establish their processes. Meanwhile, the law is not stopping. The law is pushing forward. And therefore, what this visit has actually happened is something that's well within the powers of the law enforcement agencies. Yes, what the law enforcement agencies have yet not done is initiate criminal action against the service provider and its top management. Once that starts kicking in, a very, very serious message is going to go that, look, as service providers, you don't have to be party to the merits or demerits of any complaint. You give the information as is requested, and then let the law enforcement agencies take up their own particular course of action. But having said that, I think a lot of service providers are under the mistaken notion that because these rules have been challenged in different public interest litigations, in different high courts, and now the Supreme Court, well, let's wait and watch how things finally happen.
Yes.
What they're not realizing is that the Supreme Court has not yet granted a stay on the operation of these rules. So these rules continue to be legal, valid, and binding, and they will have to be mandatorily complied with. Else, the service providers are playing with fire because there will be criminal exposure for the top management and for the companies, apart from causing a huge amount of reputational risk and damage in the coming times.
Okay, thank you so much for clarifying that. Do stay on with us. I want to bring in right now Tuhin on this conversation. Tuhin, the messaging, it seems, really is to say, take us seriously. When we ask you for certain things, you respond to us. And when we ask you to take down something, you do. Because despite the fact that the government seems to have asked Twitter to remove that manipulated media tag, that wasn't done. Is this the message we are sending to the social media platforms? Because I don't see any other reason why Delhi police had to go to the office. I'm sure they didn't expect to find anybody in the times of a pandemic and work from home era in a social media giant's office at 7:30 in the night.
You're getting a little confused, and we like Twitter because Twitter over here seems to be increasingly confused about its role. Twitter is a medium, it is an intermediary. It is not an original content creator, and by virtue of that, it does not have the mandate to decide what is manipulated media, certainly not based upon one FIR which the Congress party has lodged. That's point number one. Now, secondly, now, the Twitter MD in India says that he's not liable to respond because apparently the decision has been taken by somebody in the United States of America. That's all the more scary. Are we suggesting that foreign powers are now deciding? You know, the international deep state is now going to have its impact on Indian politics. I think that's all the more scary. It requires proper investigation. And this is, in fact, the opportunity to, make Twitter fall in line because there were a set of compliances which they had to conform to, which they have very defiantly chosen not to conform to, or at least that's the sense which one has got. So if you operate in India, you need to, respect the Indian laws, and you need to, show that respect to the set of compliance norms which have been laid out for you.
But what makes you so sure that they actually put that label? Because the Congress party filed a complaint.
Is there any other reason for that? There was a tearing hurry. What was a tearing hurry? I'm sure the decision to include the manipulated media tag succeeded the FIR, not preceded it. If it preceded
so usually the way this works is Twitter's internal systems do their own verification. There were also fact checkers who put out these documents and raised questions and shared their own analysis. Now, why Twitter did it is for Twitter to answer. I was just asking if you know something that I don't know, because that sounded like an assumption more than a fact. That's all. Probably it could be that, Tuhin. We don't know. Twitter will have to respond to us about that.
Sponsored fact checkers are the biggest fake news peddlers. We all know that. What is the basis of their fact check? The ones who do the, Uber or whoever does the Twitter fact check, these people are sponsored by the Congress. They are the biggest fake news peddlers. They will twist their own fact checking so as to, make everything seem against the government. So I think, let's stick to the
so let me take that point across to Anshul Avajit. Anshul, basis what did the Congress party file this? How do you believe the fact checker says Tuhin Sinha, they are the biggest peddlers of fake news?
Tanvi, from this rather unfortunate incident, what has come to be most true is that the weaponization of the Delhi police and other agencies which are controlled by the center is now complete. It is absolute. It has been perfected. So the agencies now can go after anyone. Anyway, there is a shrinking space for freedom of thought, for freedom of speech in this country. And this goes for major platforms which are used for that purpose, major platforms, avenues and mediums like Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, etc. And now that is being targeted by the center to go after its detractors. It's been happening for 2.5 years, and that is a larger political story. Mr. Duggal may have told you about the technicalities of how this is approached, what are the various filters within Twitter, how they process information, how the truth is arrived at. But the farcical point here is, and rather serious, I must say, that the Delhi police went and raided Twitter rather than going after the offices of the BJP, which actually the fake toolkit originated. Now, what happened on the 18th of May, I will tell you exactly what happened, Tanvi, that we filed a complaint with the Delhi police. The Delhi police did not let us file an FIR. So we had to go to Chhattisgarh, and that, really exposes the dubiousness and the really, the partisanship of the Delhi police. We had to go to Chhattisgarh to file that complaint. And after that complaint, now you raid Twitter instead of going after actually the people who originated this fake toolkit case. It has been proved beyond doubt from the content of this case that it is absolutely false, even if you have doubt, right? So you assume that the investigative agencies are impartial, they want to conduct an impartial survey and process that information and then arrive at a conclusion or something, whatever they are. Then you have to go after the people against whom the case is filed. Now, you are misdirecting your wrath. You're going after the people who actually have laid out a statement. You can very well do that. As was pointed out by the powers now that have been used now and which are now being used, which will be subsequently used to go after these agencies. They are all-encompassing powers. And now we will find that there is less freedom of speech in this country after these powers are utilized and after the way the investigative agencies are going about their business. It's highly unfortunate, very regrettable.
But tell me, Anshul, the part of the research that has been used, especially in the sections of the Central Vista project, were those not officially part of Congress's internal research documents?
Absolutely, they were. That's what we are saying. There are 2 documents that have actually been taken in, parts of them, manipulated, fabricated in a way that the BJP has perfected in their old departments. I mean, this is what they do. They do all this kind of work. They've been doing it for years. This is how their mind works. But this is such a clumsy effort. I mean, would we ever say in any document, first of all, that go and help people who are only tagged with the Indian Youth Congress hashtag? Would this ever be said? Would we ever say that we create a divide between religions in order to capitalize on a particular situation? This is unlike us. So would we say, please favor journalists? Please favor journalists because they are more likely to help us in any situation that needs help as far as COVID is concerned. We would never do that. Yes, there have been 2 documents that have been used. One is the Central Vista document. Yes, we've gone after the government in that. It is our duty to go after the government, to critique them at every level, particularly when there is such callousness shown by this government in which the Prime Minister is building his Diwan-e-Khas. We can go after that because we believe that this is an immoral thing to do at this particular time when the country is suffering. We will go after them in every category. I mean, you had a program of vaccinations before this. I mean, every platform in this country is critiquing the government. Do we really need a toolkit to critique it? Everybody's doing it for us. You guys are doing it. The newspapers are doing it. The civil society is doing it.
Yes.
The Aam Aadmi is doing it. The youth are doing it. The Mahilayen are doing it. Everybody's doing it. We don't need to bring out a toolkit.
Yeah. Okay, so let me get in Tuhin to respond to this. Tuhin, there are some parts, especially when it comes to the Central Vista project, which is part of their own research, but there are many other parts of which Congress party says doesn't sound like them.
First of all, no raid has been taking place. Let me correct Anshul. The police merely went to serve a letter, a show cause letter or whatever letter you call it. So there has been no raid. It's been well over an hour, so the Congress could have, corrected its version. There is no raid.
Thank God for small mercies.
You at least have a Chhattisgarh government where you can file such frivolous cases. 2 years down the line, you may not have more state governments which would entertain such cases. So, you need to thank yourself for such mercies. So anyway, we know what the Congress presently is capable of. Now, we also could have probably filed the case, but since the Congress has already filed the case, and we already know of Soumya Verma, a lady called Soumya Verma, who was attached, or who may be still attached with the office of a Congress sitting MP, and then her social media accounts disappear. So there was definitely a Congress angle to it. There was a Congress link to it. And since the matter is being investigated, what's the tearing hurry? Let Delhi police come to the truth of it. And I'm sure the truth will get exposed in the coming days.
I
The
hope the
problem
Delhi
is the
police
matter is
also
not
asked the
getting
BJP leaders
investigated.
who shared
There
it
is
to
no
say
partial
where did the document come from? The Twitter. Okay, no, we'll have to wait and see. I'm sure the investigation is just about begun. Actually, not even that. This is still at a preliminary inquiry stage. They've not even filed an FIR yet. There is, of course, a lot of messaging and signaling which is happening. The Delhi police has said that the Delhi police team went to Twitter office to serve a notice to Twitter as part of routine process. This was necessitated as we want to ascertain who is the right person to serve a notice, as replies by Twitter India MD have been very ambiguous. Twitter India right now hasn't responded officially to what's happened, but very quickly I want to go back to Mr. Pavan Duggal on what this tells us, Mr. Duggal, under the new regime. The message that perhaps is coming clearly from the government's end to the social media platforms on how things are going to function, of course, unless there is a different court ruling later at some point.
The messaging is loud and clear. The rules of the game have changed. It's time that the service providers realize that they are here in their only mere capacities as intermediaries. They don't need to take sides vis-a-vis the merits or demerits of any complaint. Any request coming in, they are mandated under law to disclose all information and logs to the law enforcement agencies. They don't do so, they risk criminal prosecution against their own selves, their top management for various offenses under the Indian Penal Code and the IPC. Now, this was not the position earlier, but this is now the changed position, which effectively means that if you're an intermediary, it will be actually serving your purpose that you actually cooperate with the law enforcement agencies. If as an intermediary, you want to potentially raise the flag for and on behalf of a particular party or not, realize that that's a particular maneuver that's fraught with a lot of risks. The law wants you to be a mere independent, impartial player. You should retain your position vis-a-vis that. Please go ahead and do your compliances, because even if your compliances under the IT rules 2021 are not complete, that will still give a law enforcement agency a handle to go ahead after you. So the important thing is, if you want to retain as an intermediary your statutory exemption from legal liability under Section 79 of the IT Act, go ahead and comply with these rules. Yes, if you are not comfortable with these rules, go ahead and challenge their constitutional validity. If these rules are set aside or they are ultimately modified by court of law or they are repealed, that's a different ballgame. But till such time as there is no order from a court of competent jurisdiction, this is now the changed legal scenario, completely changing the rules of the game. And therefore, the quicker these service providers comply with these parameters, the better it will be for protecting their own legal interests and also for ensuring that they do not get unnecessarily exposed.
So, no, very quickly, if I may ask you, for Twitter to put manipulated media as a label, Mr. Duggal, for Twitter to put the label manipulated media on any tweet, will they have to get first some kind of an approval? Because, I mean, this is part of their policy. So what happens to that?
It's part of their policy. It's part of their statutory exercise of due diligence that they're required to do under Section 79(2)(c) of the Information Technology Act. So they don't have to go to any authority. On the contrary, now, given the fact that despite India does not have a dedicated law on fake news, the IT rules 2021 are putting them a specific responsibility. Please identify what's fake news and ensure that the same does not get disseminated, transmitted in any manner whatsoever. So if in pursuance of that exercise of due diligence, the service provider has particularly marked a particular content as manipulative media or not very clear media or whatever, it's well within their powers. They are not required under the IT rules to go for any prior permission either from the government or from any statutory authority. In fact, if they don't do so, then they're likely to be prosecuted against for their failure to comply with such a mandatory obligation under the IT rules 21.
For their failure to do so. Absolutely, for their failure to do so. Now all that has to be done is for Twitter to justify basis what internal investigation or information, did they decide to put these manipulated media tags on tweets by BJP leaders? Remember, while the top spokespersons and leaders did tweet this, including members of parliaments, many ministers also retweeted it, which is why it has become an extremely important one for the government to take on with Twitter. And the fact that the Twitter did not pull down the manipulated media tag for the last couple of days, despite the government taking it up with them, has only intensified this fight. We'll wait and watch to see where the Delhi police takes it next. Big thank you to all of the panelists for joining us on this conversation.